Thank you all for coming. We appreciate your interest in the articles that have been included on annual town meeting warrant for May 7th that have to do with the proposal to build a new fire station. I'm guessing you're all here because you know about these. These are Articles 14 and 15 on the warrant. Article 14, we'll go into a little bit more detail later. Article 14 is asking town meeting to approve the purchase of 55 Main Street, which is the property with the Village Restaurant on it. And Article 15 asks for funding for construction, for design and construction of a new fire station on that property. We'll get into more details later. I wanted to go over the format of this evening. I'm going to finish my introductory remarks hopefully really quickly. I'm going to turn it over to Andrew Spinney, my fellow selectman, who's going to introduce a little background about the Village Restaurant and the owners of the Village Restaurant who have joined us here this evening. I will then go down through my long-winded 4-page handout to describe a lot of the background that led us to this point. And then I'm going to turn it over to Brendan Subricki, is that better? Who is going to talk about the costs of the relative options that I will have reviewed in my discussion. So to start off, I will let Andrew introduce they hate when I say the village people, but that.
Thank you very much. This is directed towards the people who haven't been in town since the 50s, 60s, 70s, and don't know the background. But in 1956, the village opened its doors as a small 5-booth, 7-counter restaurant at a time when you could buy fried clams for 95 cents. Today, the restaurant seats 200 diners. Mark and Kevin grew up learning the business. And for a period of time in my teens, I was even employed there, as many teens in town had through the years. Now, 62 years after opening, Mark and Kevin are looking for a new direction in their lives. And Kevin is here, and I'm going to have him come up and say a few words. Kevin, Ricci.
Hi. So I just want to clear the air about a lot of misconceptions, but last summer, and many times since, we were approached by people in the town and asked if we would consider a sale for the fire station. And the short answer and the long answer was no. And since that time, we've had some personal issues come up that made it clear that we were heading towards an exit. Sorry, about notes. We were recently again approached, and we agreed that it was, we'd take a good look at this, and we decided it was the best location, solve the continued town parking concern, looked to be the most economical approach for the town to give the volunteers the equipment and space that they need. There was nothing in the way of a backdoor deal, as I've heard said. We had a necessary confidentiality agreement before we could both move forward, do our due diligence on examining the project. And we needed a vote. We required a vote of the Selectman, the Finance Committee, and the Building Committee before we would proceed. We felt so strongly that this was the best solution, we just pushed in all our chips and agreed without a deposit or no promise to go forward with a vote from the townspeople. This wasn't the easiest route for us. We could have quietly marketed the property, announced it after the sale, but Mark and I felt strongly that the public sale would be a great loss to the town. A new owner would likely be under different financial constraints, would need to maximize return, limit their liability, and have little interest in parking for 3 churches, downtown events, and other business. Also, the stairs to the lower lot, the lower parking lot, I'm sure everybody uses, are have access across our property with no easement and would be at risk if someone chose not to have them there. Additionally, it leaves the square with a threat of future development that may not be desirable, as you can see has been happening in so many of our surrounding towns. What we ask is that you listen to the plan, the facts, and the figures. There's way too many rumors, so much false information based on somebody said or conjecture. And please listen to the details, and we believe that you will be very surprised and pleased. And personal note, and conversation between Mark and I. Mark is no one, if anyone doesn't know him, he's the one everybody says is a nice one. I said, why should we shoot ourselves in the leg to see if this will fly? And Mark said, because I don't want to be regretting it years from now because I was too afraid to try. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Mark. These guys are really the heroes behind this option. They've given us an opportunity unlike any other opportunity that the town has had in years and years. And I'm going to thank Kevin, too, for explaining the need for confidentiality. I realized that when the warrant was published and articles in 14 and 15 sort of broke into the scene, there was a lot of surprise. There had been rumors, but there was absolutely no official word about the option to purchase the village property. So this, I realized, was a bit of a surprise, and we regret that it had to come out this way, but it is because of the confidentiality. So we're having this forum and 2 more just like this to let as many people as we can know and understand the facts. All of the information is posted already on the town website. This handout will surface again. The table of costs of the various options will be available as well, and you have that as a handout tonight. So that's a little bit of background about how it came to pass. The reason that we did enter into this is we think it really is one of the best options that the town has seen for taking care of the public safety needs. The big picture plan, to just paint the overall, is that the existing station and the existing location is not sufficient to serve both the fire department and the police department. I'll get into a couple of options later, but this option allows the fire department to move to a new site to have a large enough, I call it a fire barn, because what the fire department needs is a big warm shed to keep their equipment with some facilities for offices, training room, kitchen, and things like that. But the majority of the space that the fire department needs is just a big warm place for their equipment. This and the existing station can't really be refurbished for that. So this allows the fire department to build a new station and then move into it. And when they vacate the existing station, that will have a series of renovations and refurbishments to make it a suitable police facility. The building itself is sound, it's solid, it's just not big enough for both of them, and it's not big enough for fire alone. So it makes sense to put the police there and add the necessary amenities, well, I don't want to say amenities, the necessary necessities, that sounds kind of stupid, that the police department needs in there, and we'll touch on that in a little bit as well, but just so that everyone understands, the big picture is one step at a time. This is step 1, taking care of fire. Step 2 will be taking care of police when we have that facility vacant to renovate for the police department. So to start off, I'm going to walk through this handout so that what I say sort of follows what you have and what you get to take home and what you get to hang on your refrigerators and think about for the next month. Article 14 is the ask to purchase the property at the Village Restaurant for the price of $2.4 million. Through agreement with the Riccis, that money would come from the sale of real estate at Canomo Point, And so that is an article that needs only town meeting approval to make that purchase. It's a 2/3 vote to purchase property. It's not 2/3 vote to use that money, but the reason that it's a 2/3 vote is because we're asking to purchase property. So that's Article 14. Article 15 then asks for funding to design and construct the fire station. And we'll get into those prices in a little bit when Brendan takes the microphone from me, which hopefully for you guys is sooner than later. And this article also needs a 2/3 majority to pass. It's a little complicated, excuse me, because the funding source for construction would come partially from a debt exclusion and partially from sale of Canoma Point real estate. Again, the sale of Canoma Point real estate money only needs a simple majority, but the debt exclusion requires a 2/3 majority. So if that carries with a 2/3 majority, there is already going to be a question on the ballot asking for appropriation. If the article passes, then the ballot vote counts. A ballot needs a simple majority to pass to fund the debt exclusion portion of the money only. So I think that covers did I screw anything up, Brendan? Not yet. Excellent. Okay, so then to touch on the need, which I've already alluded to a little bit, is about the fact that the existing facility is undersized and can't support police and fire together. It can't even support fire alone, although it can be restored, renovated to support police. The current facility has a number of deficiencies, and a large one for both departments is that there are no lockers or showers or other necessities that the responders need to clean themselves after they respond to something that you wouldn't want to take home to your family. So if anyone hasn't been to the existing station, it's worth a trip. Either Chief Dan or Chief Pete would be happy, or any of their men would be happy to walk you through the facility, I'm sure. The existing station has insufficient ventilation for fire equipment, insufficient room to store all the equipment, and has virtually no facilities for the police that they need to perform their duties. They do have an evidence room, but that's about it. There's not really adequate place for storing of weapons and ammunition, things like that, and there is not a holding cell, which is something that sooner or later is going to become a liability for the town when we can't properly process people that have been detained. Nice word for arrested. So, as I've said, the fire department really needs to have a new structure, which is sort of the impetus for the votes that we've put on the warrant for this May. To explore the liabilities of the town a little further, it's not really just a convenience for our people, it's a necessity. We're exposing them to hazardous materials. They're taking these hazardous materials home on their persons and on their gear to their families, which is not proper. Excuse me. Old age is tough. The insufficient facilities also make it harder for both departments to attract new members, and particularly for the fire department, since our fire department is a call fire department that relies on volunteers. It becomes harder and harder with changing demographics to get people who work and stay in town to volunteer for these positions. So it's important that the town respect their service and provide facilities that are adequate. I'm going to keep doing this, aren't I? Something to consider in all of this is that the call fire department does save us substantially over communities that need to have paid personnel on staff. The cost of having paid personnel would exceed 3 or 4 times the cost of building a new station that would be more serviceable for our volunteers. The last thing that, as far as the potential liabilities for the town, is that next year, February 2019, less than a year from now, the state will be adopting OSHA standards as their protocol for workplace safety. These standards are a lot stricter than those are in place, and there is also talk of increased enforcement. We already know that our facilities have a number of liabilities that would invoke OSHA fines, and then once you have that, you are forced to remediate. So if we do it of our own volition, we probably would not get fined, even if the fire station isn't necessarily complete when these regulations go into effect. So that's a little bit of why we're pursuing this option now. Background on what has been done to date. Even before I got onto the select board 8 years ago, I was a member of the town building committee, so I've been serving on that committee for 9 years, and with a group of people, we've been looking at options for public safety facilities since then. In 2012, we had a study done that considered the existing site, considered town, library, police, and fire all at the same time. Obviously, the town and library has been taken care of, so we're still just grappling with the two public safety department needs. That report addressed construction of a public safety building on the John Wise Avenue site, which abuts the cemetery property and fronts onto Route 133, and it also looked at the existing site as well. Since then, we have had another study done, it was a siting study to look at different configurations of public safety in the area where it is between the existing site and town hall. And this material is all online for people who want to take a look at it. And then just recently, we had some renderings done to try and visualize the options that would be on the existing site or across the street in Shepherd Memorial Park. That study was completed. Recently, we had a public forum presenting those renderings, and then shortly thereafter, we began to have, shall we say, productive conversations with the gentleman from the Village Restaurant. And again, because of the confidentiality, this plan had never been presented publicly, so we're taking this opportunity to do that now. Looking back at some of the in addition, in the duration between the original study and some of the more recent studies, the town formed a public safety committee which met for probably close to 2 years and has since disbanded, so their work has been done, but they prepared a public safety department report. That is also online for you to read. That is not just a space needs study of the two departments, that is an overview of the two departments to understand our future needs, how they operate, and to make some recommendations to the town, in that they also do address the existing facility. So that's worth taking a look at as background material as well. Then to talk a little bit about how we hone in on some of the options that we've considered, want to talk about the fire station, limitations of where it can be located. Brendan has a couple of slides that we're going to show you to illustrate this, because I know there's a lot of talk of different sites and different options, and trust me, in the 9 years we've been working on this, we have really looked at almost, I would say literally every spot that you could conceivably stick a public safety department. We do have limitations on that, and the first limitation, as the slide shows, is that they need to be within a 1 mile radius of their current location, which is very central to town. That's important so that the response time from the fire station to any location is similar. They can't be sited at one edge of the town, because that does a disservice, obviously, to the opposite end of town. So that's the 1 mile radius you see there. Because of population densities, the desire is to remain, thank you, on the north side of the causeway of the river there. So, Brendan, if you have the next slide, that shows how that available area decreases when you just look at that area. And then the third consideration is that it's, That just got up. Okay, so this almost cuts the area that's available in half by needing to be north of the river. And then the next criteria is that the public safety buildings cannot be located in a flood zone for obvious reasons. So you can see here the flood zones carry here. The yellow area here is the town property. And Brendan, can you zoom in just a scooch on that? And so we can see that a good portion of our property here is, this is the flood zone. The hatched area is the flood zone. This is Memorial Park. So if you were out in some of the recent storms, you saw the whole park was flooded. So areas like that aren't appropriate. The fire station does need a high and dry location. If you want to leave that up a little. If you would. In addition, the preference for the department is to be on a main road simply for both responder access and responding. It's because with the call fire department, it's a two-step process. The guys have to get to the fire station and then leave the fire station in the equipment to go to the scene of the emergency. So there's access to the building and then access from the building. They're not stationed there full time. So the desire to be on a main road is fairly important. And then also we know Essex is sort of a small, quiet town, and situating public safety on a residential street would be a less than optimal scenario. I think that's it on that. So just to touch a little bit on some of the properties that we've looked at, we have spoken to a number of landowners over the years. As Kevin noted, we had pestered him before this. We'd asked about that. We've talked to John Duncan with property at Western Avenue and Story Street. School Street. And then we've also talked to Mr. Coughlin, who has property adjacent to the existing site. And these properties are not available. And until a couple months ago, the village was not available. But now we have an opportunity that is really unique for us. So then to touch a little bit, I'm going to talk about some of the sites that we seriously considered, and then I'm going to turn it over to Brendan to talk about the costs that are on the separate sheet that he has provided for that. And then mostly I'm going to go through the sites that we haven't considered, or we have considered and have rejected as with a preference for this particular option. Just so that everyone understands why, a little bit of background about the other sites is going to put into better perspective why we think that the village site is such an optimal site for the fire station. So looking at the John Wise Avenue site, it's on a busy street, and it's at the rise of that street, and the fire department is fairly unanimously not in favor of that location. That property is also controlled by the Board of Public Works, and they have recently learned that a lot of property in the cemetery that's already in use, well, it's not in use, but it was slated for use, is not available because it's in wetlands. So that this parcel, which does have some wetlands in it, but is upland as it gets towards the highway, they do need that. So it's really, they're very reluctant to part with that, understandably. Okay, yep, thank you. So this is the cemetery here, site 102, and this is the square of land on the other side of this little runoff here that is not currently hosting the dearly departed, but could be at some time. And that was the site that we looked at for public safety. So that's the John Wise Avenue site when we talk about that one. And that is sort of off the table now for the number of reasons that I've cited. The next site that we've considered and has obviously been looked at for some time is the existing site where the station sits now. As we know, that's a fairly small footprint without much available land around it, and to be able to build a combined facility on that particular parcel that would be large enough to adequately serve both departments, we would need to move Shepherd Memorial Drive towards Town Hall. There is a sewer force main under that road. We would need to move that as well so that you wouldn't be putting a building over a utility you might need to repair someday. So there's two expenses there that I characterize as costs for which you don't get anything. So you're spending money to move a road, but at the end of the day, you have the road in the same place, and the same for the force main. We would also need to demolish that building. So there's a demolition cost, and then there's also a value lost in that building, because the building, while insufficient for fire alone, does have potential to be a suitable police facility. So demolishing that building would sort of lose that asset. Oh, okay. Yep. Thank you. So this is the aerial view of Town Hall under construction, you can see. And then this is the existing facility here. So Shepherd Memorial Drive would need to move over in this area, carving some off Memorial Park to be able to take up a larger footprint there. This is the subject of some of the renderings that you will find online that look at what a combined facility would look like at that site. Other drawbacks for this are another large factor is that to renovate this building, you obviously have to tear it down, and then you need to relocate both departments and temporary facilities. So that would be another cost that we would spend in the ballpark of $700,000 to $800,000, if not more, to temporarily house both departments for the duration of the construction project. And we can talk about the money there, but probably the larger issue is that there really isn't a place to put this temporary structure. We can't put it down on the ball fields in the flood zone, down by the tennis court, anything like that. That's underwater sometimes. We can't put it at the transfer station because there's one tiny little bridge that goes into the transfer station that we all know. And you can't locate your emergency equipment at a sort of a dead end like that where there's one way in and one way out. And there really aren't other available parcels where we would be able to put a temporary structure. So cost aside, there's just the logistics of temporarily housing both departments if we were to look at the combined there. And then the last consideration for the existing facility is that we know that we hit contaminated soil when we did the force main down Shepherd Memorial Drive and when we built the handicap ramp at the station. And when we talk about contaminated soil, this isn't soil that's going to make people grow a third head or anything like that. It's soil that probably has oil or things like that from previous uses at the property. So it's not something that we need to immediately dig out and get all afraid of. It only becomes a problem if you disturb it, and if you dig it up, then the requirements are that you haul it away. A project this size where you're tearing down a building and putting in something new would require you to remediate all the soil and follow it as far as it goes. When we did those two small projects, they were small enough that we only had to deal with the soil within the footprint of that work. So this is a big number. We don't know what it is. We don't know what it could be. From my point of view, sitting on the select board trying to make responsible recommendations to the town, there's no way that I would ever bring this project to town and ask you to fund something with this many unknowns and this many opportunities to really squander cash. So that's why rebuilding at the current site is, in my opinion, and I think others on the board agree with me, not an option. So this brings us to the memorials, the Memorial Park option, and this has also been the subject of renderings that were done earlier at the end of last year, and those are online for you to look at as well. So when we talk about this, the Memorial Park site would be carving out a corner of the park here, not hitting the ball field, but taking up pretty much the area that I'm casting my little red dot over. And those renderings can be seen online. This project has a number of drawbacks, and Brendan is going to get into the costs. And the first drawback there is that it would actually cost more to build a building on that site than it would cost to purchase the village site and build a building on that. Counterintuitive, I understand, but we've been through these numbers forwards, backwards, and it is because of the type of construction and the challenges that we would have at the Memorial Park site to build there. So to highlight some of those challenges is that The building would need to be 2.5 stories with an elevator, 2 stairways, and a structural waterproof slab to allow the equipment to enter directly onto Martin Street, but to take advantage of a lower level that would be underneath. A guiding architectural principle in this building would be to keep it as small as possible to do as least damage to the park. That's not really a good motivation when you're trying to build a fire department. In contrast, building at the village site would give us more room for flexibility in the future, and it would also allow us to build a single-story structure with a small mezzanine for equipment and storage, things like that. Eliminating need for elevator, eliminating need for a foundation. The Memorial Park site, to have 2 levels, would require site work, the structural slab, a more extensive foundation as well. So those are some of the reasons that it's more expensive to build there. In addition, because the site's so limited, a contractor will, it will cost him more. He's going to be working in confined quarters, so that the actual cost of doing the work would be higher as well. Another concern here is that because of the location in Memorial Park, where you can see a building from all 4 sides there very visibly from a lot of angles, the building would need to be architecturally more appropriate, more developed in that area. We've just spent $5 million renovating our historic town hall, and to put something that doesn't sort of pay enough respect to it just seems wrong. And then there is also, in contrast to the village site, there are no utilities in the Memorial Park area, so all the utilities would need to be brought in from the street, whereas at the village site, all those services are right there and you can virtually plug into them. Other things that don't necessarily relate to costs are that we would be losing the park. And I know when we had a forum earlier to present the renderings from the 2 options on either side of Shepherd Memorial Drive, there was a lot of pushback from people in town and people who enjoy the park and the view against putting a building in Memorial Park. So there's not a cost that we can assign to that, but there's some value to our community with having that area, and value to the town hall to have that vista around it. So then to finally get to the village site, so I can hand the microphone to Brendan and you can stop having to listen to me. Oh, I'm not done with Memorial yet. In that site, there would be no additional parking for the responders. Right now, as you know, at the station, there's very little parking nearby for the responders, particularly if there's an event going on in Memorial Park or anywhere nearby. The village site would offer first responders prioritized parking so that when they do respond to a call, they have a place to immediately park the car and hop into the emergency equipment. And then finally, that was it. So up at the village then, which is the recommended option, which is the 2 articles that are on the warrant this year, there are a lot of things that recommend this, and cost is first and foremost, and Brendan's going to go through that in a minute. We do have the option for parking, both for first responders, and we do have the option to preserve a good chunk of municipal parking in the area. For people who don't know, the little buildings here, the commercial buildings, come with a parcel. This is the parcel that the town would be looking to purchase, which does include those 2 buildings. It does not include the house back here, but it's all the parking lot here that abuts Willow Court and that entire commercial building. So it's something we could look at, whether we would keep that building and continue to lease it as a commercial property, which does generate some income there as well. There is sufficient, Brendan, do you have my artful little, yeah. This is just a drawing to show the footprint of what a 10,000 square foot fire facility would look like, which is in the range of what's appropriate for the equipment that we have. That's a footprint overlaid on the village site, so you can see it's not much larger than the actual restaurant itself. So there's clearly adequate area at this site to support both the station, responder parking, and municipal parking, and perhaps keep the 2 buildings as well. As I mentioned before, all the necessary utilities are already on site. It's a flat site. It's a level site. As far as foundation work goes, for a slab-on-grade shed sort of building, and shed, when I say shed, I mean it really just is a volume, a heated volume that takes care of the equipment. But the demands for a slab-on-grade with a frost wall foundation aren't nearly what they would be at, say, the Memorial Park site, where there's a lot of foundation work that would be necessary. And there's also, as Kevin did mention, if the town doesn't take this opportunity, I know there was some initial thought that we were trying to push the village out of business, and as Kevin has elaborated, that's not the case, and they're planning soon to close up and put the property on the market. So if the town doesn't buy it, it probably will be marketed, and someone else could buy it. And as we know, with the lack of zoning districts in town, a lot of options could happen there. So that's not meant as fear-mongering. That's just pointing out other options that could happen. To say that it remains a restaurant forever would not be necessarily factual.
Thanks, Lisa. Before I do that, I'm going to show you how to get to the resources that we're going to be referencing. So if there are two ways to get there. First, just go to the town website, and you'll see that there's now a link that says Town Building Committee page, and then all of these things here are the reports that I'm referencing and that Lisa actually talked about already. Another way to do that is if you just get /TBC, you can go directly to this page without having to land on the home page. Now I'm going to pull up the financial sheet that you have in front of you. Well, I may use it when I get the slide up, yeah. Across the top, for the only option that has a land acquisition cost, which is the village option, you'll see that $2.4 million in that column. Of course, the other sites, John Wise, Memorial Park, and the existing site are already owned by the town. In the type of building, when we did the John Wise work back in 2012, that was to be a combined building, a new building for both fire and police. Memorial Park would be a new fire station in the park with a renovation of the existing building for the police. At the existing site, as with John Wise, it would be a combined building. And then on the village site, it's a hybrid of the Memorial Park site. So you have a new fire station, but in this case, at the village site, with a renovation of the same building we have now for the police. When we go through and we look at the cost to renovate 24 Martin, with the John Wise Avenue site, I have NA, and that's because at that point, we would have a brand new building out on John Wise Avenue, and there would have to be a plan to deal with what we were going to do with the existing building. We never really got through that part of the planning phase. Memorial Park, the figure to the right is included. Same thing with the 24 Martin, we're using the existing site option. For the village, we've taken the $1.885 million figure that was quoted by Mr. McMillan in the Reinhardt study. It's now KLO and Bieniek, which you see written somewhere here. And we added 4 years to that. And the reason is we had to add 1 year just to get from 2017 to 2018, because he gave us that figure in 2017. Then we added 3 additional years. That's probably a year of waiting time, and then a year to get to bid after that, because in the meantime, this is the police we're talking about, we'd be doing the fire project. And then you always have to escalate for the year that you're actually in construction, because when that contractor bids on the job, they actually factor their rising cost into the job as they do the job. So the figure that we were given in 2017 about a year ago, translates to that in the future. That way we're capturing the entire cost. Going down the next column, in 2012, the total cost of the project on John Wise was about $8.1 million. The author of that, which is the same gentleman, Mr. McMillan, escalated that up for us when he did his 2017 report. Both of these reports are where I showed you on the town's website. He escalated that up, and he made an estimate that the project on John Wise Avenue would be $10 million about a year ago. We had to take the hard construction cost of that, which in 2012 was the 7.016. And using a proportion, we escalated the hard construction cost to the 8.627. That's what translates to our escalate. That's the figure we used to escalate, which I'll get into in a minute. But the base cost of construction without escalation, which is this column, was $10,000. In Memorial Park, $10,592, $200. This equates to, when you read, if you go and look at that report, it's called option 4A. At the existing site, we picked option 3 as the most closely resembling what we would actually do. If you look at option 3 in the report, you'll see that the fire apparatus actually exits out toward the water. But the configuration of that building is such that it's the closest thing. Just we would have the apparatus come out towards Martin Street. And then here at the Village property, we've been working with somebody in the industry. They're a project management firm, KVA. KVA they're not under contract with us, but they were willing to work with us right now. And they have many times in the recent past looked at metal-type construction for DPW and fire department buildings. So they're very familiar with what that costs per square foot, including some jobs that they're currently working on today. So we used them as a resource because we did not have Mr. McMillan at our disposal for looking at this most recent idea. It's important to understand, and as Lisa pointed out, between Memorial Park and the Village Restaurant, that the type of building that would be put up in Memorial Park would probably not be a metal building with slab on grade. It would be a more complex type of construction so that you could get at a much more aesthetically pleasing, architecturally appropriate building. It would also contain inside it a suspended slab so that where the grade falls away on from Martin Street, the apparatus could roll straight onto the, I guess would be the second floor because it'd be a basement underneath it. So those are the relative costs of the new construction. Then we did escalation. As I indicated, with escalation, anything that was done in 2017, we escalated at 5%, which is the current standard in construction right now for the hard construction number. We escalated that by 1 year to get to 2018 and then 2 additional years so that we have enough time to get through design and actually out to bid. And then while we're building it for a year, there's an escalation that you have to figure. And so we're doing this with all of them. So those costs, whether you had them in or not, they're all going to be proportional. And those costs are shown down here. It was included in the 2018 work that we've just done because we did that fresh and we didn't have to take an old number and move it into there. So then you're left with the total project costs, and you can see that the Village Restaurant property comes in slightly less than the next most costly is up here at John Wise. Memorial Park is after that, and then reusing the existing site is the highest one. Realize that we put in a note here, we think that the costs that were carried for moving everyone out of the building and temporarily housing them, and we know this because we did the same thing with Town Hall. We think that the engineer shot a little bit low there, and we think that those costs would actually be higher than are in the report that you can read. Also, we know that if you went after any contaminated soil, there is an allowance in there for that. We think it might even be higher. But in any case, we held the number that was used by the engineer plus standard escalation to arrive at this figure. Again, we think it would be higher. We then show all the sources of where we got our information. We have a note about how we carried escalation on what hard construction numbers we used. For option 4A, we actually used a combination. We had a hard construction number for the building itself, and that got escalated over 3 cycles. And then we had a hard construction number, the 1.885, for the work on the police station. And that got escalated, as I said before, over 4 cycles, because that work would actually be taking place even later than the firework would be taking place. That's generally it. Lisa, do you think it would be a good idea to take questions on this right now? Or did you have anything you want to add? Okay, yes. So the reason that these two are highlighted is because they represent the total fire portion of this project, noticing that the police is not highlighted here. So if you add the 2.4 and the 5.630, the amount that would be asked for at town meeting, which is at the very bottom of your sheet, is just over $8 million. Anything else? Are there questions on that? Yes.
Kurt Siebert, Coral Hill Road. 2 questions. One, it wasn't clear to me whether the temporary housing cost for the police on the Village Restaurant property for the renovation cost for the police station is included in that $2 million. $2.2 million.
Right. There would be no temporary housing cost for the village option, and that's because the fire station can be built. This would be the same as the Memorial Park option. You would build the fire station, you would move the fire department out, then you would start working on the other building for the police department. Now, we feel we'll be able to do that in a phased fashion. So, for instance, after fire is out, it may be time to put a new roof on the building. Well, that can be done while the police are still in there. And right now, as you know, they're occupying a very small portion of that building, right, and they still have the trailer available.
Okay.
So using those resources, we feel that we can fit in various projects, and they're all going to need to be phased in, and kind of work around that until the building is where it needs to be. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, it does. The second question was the Village Restaurant property did you look at having both departments on that property? And I'll sit down and I'll listen.
Yeah. We did. We've looked at a lot of different options, and as you can see, if you saw the graphic that we put up that showed that the fire station basically takes up the footprint of the Village Restaurant, if not a little more, it would be significantly larger to put police there. You would be looking at a 2-story building. You'd be looking at substantially more construction. We have in the existing station a building that is, it needs work. It needs a new roof. It needs mechanical upgrades. It needs new windows. But it's got a foundation. It's got walls. It's solid. It has a lot of potential. It doesn't have potential for fire because of the size of it. It has potential for police. It's a block and concrete building. We can build holding cells in it. We can give them the necessary locker rooms, facilities, bathrooms, that sort of stuff. There's plenty of room for indoor storage for police equipment. And there's room for the guys to spread out and have more room. There's better office space. So we think that, and as I mentioned earlier, that losing that building, whether we demolish it or sell it or something like that, is sort of losing an asset that we have. It's something that we can work with. If there's a problem at your home, you renovate, you add on, you do something like that. You don't just tear it down and start over if it has, if it's viable structurally and you can work with it. So that's the situation that we're in. The cost to build a combined facility would be significantly more than building the fire station. The fire station construction is going to be a cheaper sort of construction than police construction. It's different needs. Basically, there's a lot more security involved in what the police do. The fire station just needs a big warm space for the equipment and some services for the responders as well.
Hi, Kathy Galley, 45 Lakeshore Drive. I question you're saying a metal pre-constructed building for the village property. It's my understanding that a public service building needs to be of a concrete block. I know my brother, who is a fireman, was on the building committee for the Hamilton Fire Department, and this is what he has told me.
Again, in speaking with the partner we're working with right now, KVA, they build DPW and fire departments with this metal construction in Massachusetts all the time. So we did look at that, and we're being told that it is a fairly common occurrence. In this particular case, we would also be looking for, on some faces of the building, a facade that would take the kind of that metal view away from it, and you'd have a much more appealing. Although that type of construction probably wouldn't work down at Memorial Park, because even though you're going to dress up the facade, it's still going to be just a giant box. And again, if you go online and you look at the renderings that were done, you'll see kind of how that could look in that area, and it was kind of imposing. But we've been told that this type of construction is very much acceptable.
Okay, my second question is, you're promoting that it's utility ready, and it does not have a 6-inch water line going to it now, so that would need to be put in, as well as phase 3 electric. So it is not utility ready.
Well, I think we're speaking of the fact that it has a sewer connection, it has the domestic water line already there, and it has the gas line.
It has a 1.5-inch line now.
Right, domestic water, right.
You'll need a 6-inch line.
I understand that, but it also has the gas connection there. Are there other things that will need to be added? Yes, you're correct.
I'm Tom Daniel on Pond Street, and just want to say thank you for all your work on this. It's clearly a challenge to pull something like this together for the town. I have a question about the John Y. scenario. One of the alternatives that wasn't studied was just putting fire there. So I'm wondering about that being a viable option for a slab construction, just with fire there, and then renovating the police. So it's similar to the village proposal, except there's not the acquisition cost of the land. And
Yes, so that particular site, we didn't do a lot more work with other scenarios there. The reason is, most recently, we've learned, as Lisa pointed out, that they're going to need that site for cemetery use. There are other areas in the Spring Street Cemetery that they thought they were going to be able to use, but we've been told that due to wetlands regulations, they're not going to be able to use it. And the Board of Public Works, which is a separate board here in town, has indicated that that would be a problem. The fire department also does not really favor that site. Lisa, did you have?
It's not a flat site, so slab on grade wouldn't be an option. We'd have to do a lot of site work to make a level slab there. And there are wetlands back there.
Again, like she said, it's not a flat site, first of all, so it kind of would be more custom construction. Location-wise, those who go out of town and come around the corner by Ernie's and start over the hill, that's from where everybody goes from 25 to 55. And you would need traffic control. We also had some public meetings in the past about putting the other project that was discussed there. There was great opposition by the neighbors. It's not a safe place to pull out of. There's no visibility. It's at the bottom of a rise, like I said, where people are going 55 miles an hour. And the construction cost, I think, would be more significant and probably cause need for an elevator if there was multi-levels there. For instance, a multi-level elevator is about $100,000. I think that's what 50, but the 3-level one was 100.
Thank you. My question, though, was if an elevator, those extra costs would be necessary if it were just a fire station. It sounds like that analysis wasn't done because of other considerations. So it's just a question that I have about what that would be. I understand the access concerns, the other concerns from the cemetery needs, but just that's just a question, John question. I have a separate one.
Just one more thing on that too is if for some reason, we did pursue that option, and we did strike some kind of a deal with the Board of Public Works, and Scott's going to give me the hairy eyeball. But if we were able to do that, take away that cemetery property, then we would need to find alternative cemetery property, and that would again be buying land. So it would, that it's not necessarily a free site, because we're taking use from something else, and we would need to replace that use at some point, and then look for cemetery property.
Yeah. So I guess that's just an area that I have a question about. The second was just the appraisal or the value of the 2.4 million. I was late, and perhaps that was addressed before I got here, how the valuation was determined.
The town did hire its own appraiser to look at that, as well as that was the asking price of the folks that own the village. That's where the price ended up. The selectmen are going to discuss in the future whether there'll be more access to the documents behind that. Presently, those are part of an executive session discussion that happened rather quickly as the confidentiality portion of this pursuit was underway. But we did do our own due diligence on that.
The sellers had an appraisal done, and the town had an appraisal done. We both had an appraisal done, and they were in fairly close alignment. It certainly was in reasonable limits. As Brendan mentioned, that material is still covered by the executive sessions that we needed to have. We're going to have a discussion about that on the 23rd of April and try and release as much documentation as we can. I do want to caveat it with it. The appraisal that the Village Restaurant provided to us has a lot of information about personal business, property, salaries, things like that. So that material is going to need to be redacted before we can make it public. It's not fair to us to publish private information of the seller. So that needs to be worked on. We do want to get the material out to people, but it's just not available yet because of the way this unfolded. And I apologize for that, but know that the Board of Selectmen, the Finance Committee, and the Town Building Committee have all looked at both appraisals and are still in agreement that $2.4 million is an appropriate asking price.
And then just one last question is about the value that the property generates to the town currently in terms of taxes, property taxes. And currently as a restaurant, I think we have local option on meals, just what that comes out to be.
So yes, those are excellent questions, and that is on the handout. There's a little discussion of some of those considerations. So the loss of the property tax from the Village Restaurant, which obviously when that turns to municipal property, the town doesn't pay itself taxes because it can't. So the value of those taxes, when reapportioned across the rest of us Essex residents, would increase the average tax bill for a property assessed at $537,000 by $10.30 a year. So that would be the premium that the average, and the 537 assessed value is the average value of a home in Essex. And that taxpayer would see an increase of $10.30 a year because of the loss of the village tax revenue. Yeah, it's just under $16,000 a year is the tax that the village pays currently. There's also questions about the loss of the meals tax revenue. I know that already, and Ginny might be able to back it up, that the meals tax without the Fortune Palace and without Periwinkles is still trending above previous years. The extent, I don't think it's fair to say that if the village closes, all that meal tax will be lost. I think a lot of it will move around within town. Obviously, it won't all stay. We know that the village attracts customers from a wide area who come specifically for fried clams and other delicacies that they serve up. but we do have a new restaurant opening where Fortune Palace was, and Periwinkle's, well, will be reopening under another name. So there are still opportunities. And Lewis's was offline for many years, and now the Boathouse is doing well down there. So I don't think that the meals tax is going to be a significant hit. And then the final consideration about costs lost is the Water and Sewer Department collects substantial fees from the village for both water and sewer. But what people need to understand there is that the DPW operates sort of at cost. They provide a service and they bill for that service. So when they're no longer needing to provide that service, the costs go down. So it's not a direct proportion, and there will be some adjustment, but that's a really hard number to try and tease out exactly. You can't just say that that money that the village would pay to water and sewer is lost because the water and sewer department isn't treating that sewage and not treating that water either. So it's a fuzzy number at best, I think.
Alden Blodgett, 10 Orchard Road. My concern is really with the larger picture that this fits into, because you do have on your sheet here that we're going to be eventually paying over $2 million for the renovation for the police department. We have 2 schools that are on the books, and we have an untold amount, even up to $20 million of infrastructure and water. So we're facing a lot of big bills over the next several years. And so my concern is that we're looking at this as one thing, but there's a larger picture. And right now you might say, well, we have the money, we can get it from Canomo, and we're using that now. But my question is, well, is that the best way to use it, given the other things that are on the docket? And sort of, what's the overall project priority that we've got? And then what are the overall effect on the taxes going to be? We know what this one is fairly small, but the other ones will probably be larger if we use up the Canomo Point money, for example. So it's my question about how this fits into the broader picture.
Oh, look, there's a guy from the FinCom. That's a good question, and it's a hard question, and we don't deny that there are a lot of large issues facing the town in the future. The FinCom is working hard on these, and we're looking at the best way to strategically time these and space them out so that the burden is not too large. We understand the effects of these projects. The reason that we're looking at this one now is that it is so long overdue. The facilities that our first responders and our police force work out of are shameful. And I don't want to get on a soapbox and talk about that too much, but this is long overdue. The departments are operating hamstringed out of insufficient facilities. And I think the biggest concern is that the people in those departments are working in substandard conditions, and it's just not fair. These are the people who take care of us. So I understand that this is just a small project in the scheme of the things that are facing us, and we're going to need to manage them and look at the best way to handle them as we move forward. You'll also see that on the town warrant, there is another article asking for funds to look at and I'm totally departing here, but we're looking at a study to look at the water system in town, to understand its age, to understand its fragility, to understand what is the best way to sequence this kind of work so that we're not faced with repairing things when they break, but that we can take a proactive, phased approach that's not going to be too detrimental to the taxpayers, but also address these needs in the coming years. So we are looking at this, we're considering it. It's unfortunate there's a lot of needs in town that have not been addressed for years, and we're doing a little bit of catch up, and we realize we can't do it all at once. We'll be holding forums, we'll be holding discussions, we want feedback, we want input. But I don't think that particularly for this project, relieves of us our responsibility to do the right thing by our fire and police department. So there, sorry, I'm done on my soapbox.
Nick Ellis from Rocky Hill Road. Thank you all for the work you've done sorting this stuff out to this point. First question, I guess, the numbers we have here, particularly this cost to build a new building, is there going to be some sort of detailed cost provided for us to look at prior to us voting? Because right now we have a number with a name next to it, and that's about it.
So the costs that you're seeing on this summary come from detailed breakdowns that are within the reports that I referenced earlier.
I'm more talking about the new cost for the new option. Yes, this $5 million number that we're looking at here.
That?
Yes, correct.
Yep. I can definitely take and do a breakdown on that. We have that information. I also want to mention that the sheet that you have in front of you is not the most current sheet.
We're looking at funding, design, and construction together so that we get the whole thing funded and it can all go ahead. Again, the process of asking for design money is becoming increasingly unpopular because of our history of getting design done and then saying no. So packaging it together is a better strategy, and then the whole project can move forward. So that's one reason that we're not doing design and then construction.
Okay, understood. So, sorry, to just kind of follow up, we have various studies that we've done for the other options, detailed studies, detailed information, detailed reports, renderings, everything else. That's the information that we've all had to look at for the past year. Now we're being asked essentially in a month to make a decision to fund an $10+ million project, essentially with not nearly as much information as we had for the previously studied project. So the concern that I would have in that case is how detailed we've been, and have we made sure that we have addressed all the potential variables? Because, for example, we could stick a shovel in the ground at the village and start digging up oil barrels like we did on Shepherd Drive when we buried a sewer pipe. It's just, I guess, from your perspective, do you feel like you're being conservative enough with these numbers?
Yes, based on the folks I've been talking to who are doing these types of buildings all the time, yes. Also, the town did a phase 1 environmental analysis as part of the due diligence before the purchase and sale agreement was entered into.
And that essentially is you check records and...
Yep, that is a paper exercise. You are correct. But the professionals who did that did not turn up anything that would suggest that we needed to go to the next phase.
Okay.
But as far as getting costs together, this is happening relatively quickly. And yes, we can put together something more detailed.
Very quickly,
and get that up.
I would say.
Yes.
Thank you.
It just came down to this option. When Macmillan studied it, was a little bit higher for that option 1. Yeah, because of the structural slab that's involved in it. The main differences are right in here. They're minor. These numbers didn't change. And the relative order of the way the sites break out didn't change. So I'll get that up tonight, and you'll see exactly this reflected in the format that you have there.
Hi, I'm Shelley Bradbury in 79 Eastern Ave. I just wanted to ask if you had thought in consideration of this village restaurant where it is. What's happening, it's the main thoroughway where all the cars go through, and businesses and restaurants. And we've all seen what's happened this winter with the nor'easters and the flooding of the restaurants that we have now. What's going to happen with that in the future? And by taking this spot, and I know we don't know who's going to buy it, but it seems like it's a business-oriented space, and that it's on a hillside, that we would keep restaurants or businesses there. And if we take that, then we're taking that, the business property and our main thoroughway away. So I just wanted to ask if you thought about that, because we're going to have serious problems with the flooding. It's not going to go away with climate change. The other aspect I wanted to ask is, you talked about the design on Memorial Park, how it had to be nicer because it was going to be looked at all four ways. I would say the same has to be in the village, where you're going to see it on three sides. And aesthetically, if you're going to put it on Main Street, it has to look nice as well. And I don't want to see a box if we're going to spend that kind of money. So I would say you need to consider aesthetics as well, because it is showing our town. So that's another part that I wanted to ask.
So I can comment on the aesthetics. We carried money to put a facade in front of the metal in certain locations on the building. One of the reasons that this site was more attractive is that you could put that style of building there with some aesthetic treatments. It would be much harder to do that with the same building down at the Memorial Park site. So there is some consideration for it, but it won't be as architecturally pleasing as if you had spent on a different type of construction. It's one of the ways that keeps the cost of the project where it is. Relative to the business area, Lisa, I don't know if you want to comment on that.
It's a concern, and we've met with the Chamber of Commerce yesterday, and it's also a concern from the town's point of view, because the town is property poor in the areas central to town and where we need to have these emergency facilities. So it's important as a business, but there's a lot more business property on Main Street than there is town property on Main Street. So we saw it as a priority and an option to get a high, dry central spot that would allow the town to have a central response area. And there's still other business opportunities on the street, but there really isn't any other municipal property. We are, this is one of the reasons that we're up against it here, is we have very little property in the downtown area where we need it to be able to house these facilities. Right now, we're talking about either purchasing this piece of property or building in one of our parks or building in our cemetery. I mean, those are our options. We don't have a big flat piece of property we can say, hey, look, we'll put our fire station over there. So that's why we sort of took an advantage of this. I realize it's taking away from the business community, but Main Street is lined with businesses, and we saw it as an opportunity to be able to have a spot for town facilities, because the municipal facilities are important as well to the service. It's the businesses bring livelihood to the business people and to people in town, and everyone in town enjoys the restaurants. But fire station and police station are essential to every single resident in town. So I understand the concern, and I guess I'm saying that from the perspective of the municipality, it's also a priority to have central area for our facilities as well. And I would like Dan to talk about exiting onto Main Street.
Well, first of all, we started the building committee 9 years ago. Prior to that, Chief Silva, myself, and Stuart Pratt were on an ad hoc committee for, I think, 3 or 4 years. So we have turned every stone. What we come back to, and quite often, and it frustrates me, is we sit in these meetings and we say, why didn't we buy a terminal garage when it was available? It was $300,000 at the time. We made mistakes along the way. We have this opportunity that's been dropped on our lap, and the town can't afford to miss this opportunity. Building on the site next to the station at the park is going to do away with parking between the fire station and the town hall and the street, as well as on the opposite side for vehicles to enter and exit, and it's not going to help our situation. We are land poor. This is a piece of property that is contiguous to the rest of our land. We may take a business hit, but in the end, it's going to be the best thing for the town. I don't want to be 10 years here from now and saying, why couldn't we have bought this property? The town needs to look at it seriously. We are land poor. There is no place to go. If we want to build in the Manchester Woods in the middle of a swamp, fine, we have land out there, but there is no central access. You have to sacrifice to get to where we need to be.
Hi again, Kathy Galley, 45 Lakeshore Drive. What studies have you considered as far as the safety of putting the fire station right there at 55 Main Street? One of the things you're promoting is that we could keep parking for the churches. What happens when church is letting out and there's a fire alarm? People are trying to get back to their car.
It's no different than now when we have a fire alarm, it's a baseball game, or the parking lot out back at the station full. I mean, the vehicles they have good visibility, they can see 3 sections as they come out to the road. It's a better location than John Wise Avenue. It's a better location than where we are now. Have we done studies per se? Probably not, but the consensus is from the members of the department, who are the people who do these calls, that the access there is more than sufficient and should be a safer environment than what we now have at our existing site.
All I can picture is my mother-in-law getting out of the Catholic Church to get back to her car, and the confusion that would ensue if a fire call went off, and the safety issues there. So, and what about the intersection? That's the busiest place in town where people are churning. Are you going to have to put in a traffic light?
Whenever emergency vehicles pull out, everyone stops. So when the fire sirens go out and trucks are flashing lights and pulling out the road, people are going to have to stop wherever it is. They don't just keep going. They stop. People need to not walk into the street. You know, there's a certain level of personal responsibility, I guess, and that's why all emergency vehicles have lights and sirens and things like that to warn people to stay out of the way, to pull over things. Wherever they pull out, it's going to be an issue. It's not just an issue at this particular location.
But you're pulling out where there's an intersection, I think is my point, versus out onto a straight road.
We haven't done studies. We don't have many options. The equipment has to exit onto some street. I think it's preferable that it exits onto Route 133 rather than onto Story Street or another place that is a residential street. So, you know, obviously it's an interruption and it's an intrusion, but it's an emergency, so people will stop.
Annalise, 2 Southern Ave. So it looks here like between the existing and the Village restaurant property, there's about a $2 million difference. In my mind, if we go with the existing property, not only does this look like it's, not only does it look like it's a different building type, so the existing building, or at the existing site would be a much more aesthetically pleasing building to accommodate both the fire station and the police station, but we could keep a business. So I'm just wondering if you guys have considered the water taxes, the meals tax, and just the property tax on that, and how quickly, if we kept that property, it could make up for that extra $2 million. And that would pay in perpetuity those taxes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I did. I don't know if you were. I did talk to them about the meals taxes, the property taxes, and there's also. We also heard Mr. Blodgett speak to the fact that we're facing a lot of other needs in town, from schools to water, and so the proposal that's in front of town now is something that we looked at long and hard, and as Dan has said, you know, we've been at this 9 years, and we're looking at something that is going to be cost effective and reasonable. It is the best approach for gaining town land that's much needed, and for also trying to control the costs as best we can. So I realize that there's the property tax issue. I don't think that the water and sewer really is a significant number, because when it's not used, it's not needed. That service isn't needed. And then the meals tax, I think, would reapportion. I do get that we are taking a business from town, but I also know, and talking to the Riccis, that they are anxious to see the town take over this property, and that their legacy can be something that is good for the town and provides for the public services here. They are not interested in seeing some other scenarios come in. They would rather have that site memorialized as a municipal property with a public safety building on it. So we're not doing this because we want to make the Riccis happy, but I know that's their sentiment as well, and they're business people in town. So
Sure, and I'm just piggybacking off of that. If they want to sell it, which is totally everybody's right, you can put in a deed that the town can use the parking if they're going to the churches, or use the walk down to the park.
that would decrease the value.
Yeah, I understand. That option of writing into the deed what somebody else is going to do with their property is not, it's just not reasonable or going to happen, because no one is going to buy a piece of property when they're told commercial piece of property when they're told when and what they can do with it. It's just, it just can't happen, and it's not something I could expect or demand. So if that answers the question.
And the other thing is if the property does go to private sale, there's no guarantee it's going to be a revenue-generating business. Their property has 6 sewer betterments, 8 sewer betterments, the equivalent of 28 bedrooms. Let's do some math. 28 bedrooms, 14 two-unit bedrooms. Every other bedroom has a kid in it. That's 15 kids at $16,000. The tax money that comes in on that property will not outweigh the cost of the children in the school system. So just remember that when you, there's options out there that could be out of our control. They come in there and put Section 8 housing in. Not that we don't need housing, and I'm not speaking against it. I think it has its place, and every community needs it. But if a project like that went forward, it would be out of the town's control and basically regulated by the state. So then now we have a $500,000 cost added to the school budget. We probably wouldn't be collecting more than a couple $100,000. So, you know, think of these things that just that sewer betterment alone allows that property to be developed as.
Don Burnham, 22 County Road. First off, I have looked at and listened to all of the options. My husband's been on the fire department for 45 years. 3 years ago, he had bladder cancer, which is the highest cancer rate for firemen. When he was first fighting fires, they didn't have masks to help them breathe in better air. I would like to know, and you don't have to raise your hand, but I want to plant a seed. I'd like to know how many people have actually been to the fire station. One of the things that Dan talks about is there's supposed to be a ventilation system in that building. The trucks are this far apart from each other. There is no room to put that ventilation system in there. I have lived with my husband for a long time, bringing home other people's blood and soot with, they know nothing about what was in those things when they go in to fight a fire. They're there thinking about saving the people. My mother had a heart attack at 3 o'clock in the morning. There were a dozen men that responded. I realize it's going to raise our taxes, but you have to stop and you have to listen to these men and women who are out there every day trying to save you and your house, and they deserve your respect. I drove by today. There was a ball game going on. Manchester High School had a ball game. It's great to sit in my office and watch the ball game. Manchester Essex, excuse me. They're my school committee people. But the parking there is so limited. There were cars all along either side of Martin Street. If we build the fire station over in that corner, there will be no parking on Martin Street because there is not enough room for the trucks to come out and swing down the road if there are cars parked on both sides. And if you haven't been to the fire station to understand what they're talking about, please go down and check it out. Check out the fact that Chief Silva has been in a trailer for 8 years? Almost 10? It's actually not a trailer because it's against the law to have a trailer in town for more than 2 years. But you need to understand that these people desperately need your help to get in a better situation. As far as people crossing the street after church, people, they're gonna stop. If you are in this town, you know we have a volunteer fire department. You know that they're coming from all over town to get to that station. They have their lights going. You need to really think about these people. They need your help, and they need this upgrade.
And Dawn touched on the ventilation system, and I should probably run down. Lisa covered briefly like some of the amenities. They're not amenities, they're necessities. Shower facilities is one thing. Decontamination area for the gear as well as any type of the equipment we use. Carcinogens in the fire service, even though we don't do that many calls, it still happens. People have to be able to decontaminate the gear. The times of us, taking our gear, leaving it smoky and throwing it in the back seat with our kids has gone away. We leave our gear in the station. It needs to be stored in a clean place. Right now, it's stored in a garage that every time the trucks start, now the soot goes on the gear. Even if we wash it regularly, it still leaves a contaminant on the gear. The other thing is, as I tell, there's $3 million of fire equipment in our station. We don't have a fire alarm system. We don't have a sprinkler system. Would you leave $3 million laying around on your table, not in a secure spot or at least monitored? Those are some of the challenges we have. To currently upgrade that building and do that stuff while we're in there is next to impossible. As Don said, we have probably about this much between each vehicle. There's systems like your household vacuum system that hang from the ceiling and plug into the trucks, and as you drive out, it does itself so you don't have the contaminants in the building. We can't physically fit it because we wouldn't be able to walk down between the trucks. Buying vehicles, the height and weight restrictions and the limitations on width make it more costly for us to buy vehicles because we have to find custom vehicles to fit in the station. So over a period of time, that will have some payback. And I just, trying to think what else. Should talk about just generalized ventilation. None of the police and fire offices currently have any type of adequate ventilation, air conditioning, heating. I touched on the ventilation. I guess that was about it. And, but the locker facilities and the shower facilities and where these guys are take stuff home to the kids is the most important thing. They're in car accidents, people are in cars, helping people, getting contaminated wherever. It's not fair to them to be bringing them home to their kids and washing it in their own laundry and so forth, so.
Hi, I'm Teresa Whitman, 8 Lufkin Street. Just building on what Mr. Ellis had said earlier, I just want to put out there, I appreciate everything our fire department does for us. I've been served, close family has been served brilliantly by them, and I'm so grateful. And I don't know that, I personally don't know that the Village Restaurant property isn't the best choice. I don't know that. But I do know that when this started in 2009, I did pay attention, and I did, when the drawings were rendered last year, I did make a point to go see them and look at them. And as a resident, my expectation was that we were trying to choose from between those. And so then to suddenly have it sprung upon us that, oh, and by the way, at town meeting, this is what we're voting on, was a surprise and almost disappointing to me because I had invested my energy in trying to follow this and trying to pay attention and do my due diligence to support what clearly needs to happen in a new fire station. So my question is there a reason we can't have more of a voice in this decision? I can appreciate the desire for confidentiality as that went on, but could it not be that we have the option to have a vote, even if it's not a town meeting vote, but some sort of vote to see which of the options would be most appropriate to bring forth in a combined package, like you had said, of design and build at the same time? Because it seems to me that, from my perspective, this feels so very rushed, and from a resident point of view, that it almost seems unfair.
Understood. And
can I sit while you talk?
No, and I understand that, and I appreciate it, and it's an unfortunate circumstance of how this happened, but know that the Town Building Committee has been looking for other property for 9 years. We've been asking people, we've been looking, we haven't found anything. We haven't found anything that's available. When this became available, the confidentiality was there. But we also know from looking at the options that we have that working on the property that we have is a compromise. And if we were to find a site like the Village that was really appropriate and applicable, it is far and away the best option to resolve the problems that we face. It lets us keep our park. And I understand it's happened quickly, it's a rush, it's also a limited time offer. The property is not going to be made available again and again. We can't keep coming back to the well on this one. As Dan said, we've passed up a whole lot of opportunities to purchase land, and if we pass this up, we'll be losing a park, or we'll be losing a cemetery, and we'll be buying property somewhere else. Whatever it is, it's not an optimal solution. This is buying central, flat, high, dry, easily accessible property in a good location that will easily house a fire station. There's not really, outside of taking the business out of the town, a downside to it, and taking the business out of the town isn't even necessarily a given. The business may go anyway. Anything else could happen there as well. So that's the reason we're having these forums. That's the reason we're trying to get as much information out as we can. We realize it was rushed, but we also know that we've been waiting and waiting for an opportunity to come along like this for years, and it's something that we can't pass up. It's something. Maybe the microphone's telling me it's heard enough of me tonight. It's something we simply can't pass up. We have to, it is the best option. It is a consensus of the Board of Selectmen, the Finance Committee, and the Town Building Committee that this represents the best option to solve this problem for the town. Therefore, what we do when we see something that's the best option, we put it on the warrant. We do public forums. We're having this public forum next Wednesday night, and then the Tuesday night after that. We're trying really hard to reach out and get this information to people because we know it was rushed. But it's an opportunity that we can't pass up. So what we do when we see an opportunity like that is we put it on the warrant, and we try and educate people. We try and explain. We try and give you reasons, our reasons for telling you that this is the best option. We're trying to get all that information out there. It couldn't have happened any other way. It's unfortunate. It's quick. I get it. But it really is the best option, and that's why it's on the warrant. The warrant is our way of asking you if you think it's the best idea too, and the reason of these public forums is to try and give you the information that you can come to that decision, hopefully on your own, or decide against it. So it's still, we have the opportunity. Town meeting can vote all this down in May, and we start from scratch. And when town meeting votes this all down, we'll be coming back with an ask to build a memorial park, probably. That's plan B. We don't have any other options. We're gonna lose a park, we're gonna lose cemetery. We can't really put it in cemetery. It's not the optimal solution. The fire department doesn't like it. So we're gonna be left with memorial park, because I can't responsibly recommend to town meeting that rebuilding on the existing site makes any kind of sense, because it's just there's too much money invested in things that don't actually get us building product. So that's why we're here. That's why we're here tonight. That's how it all unfolded. And and I apologize, and we're trying to make good. So there you have it.
Is there not an opportunity then? Sorry. Oh yeah. Is there not an opportunity then if this does get voted down at town meeting, is there opportunity then to move forward with the expectation that anyone who had been paying attention was expecting, which is to look at these three options and have a say in what we think would be the most, or what the residents would actually be in favor of as well, to consider that moving forward? What becomes, is that what becomes the next step? Is the next step that you put Memorial Park on the next warrant? Because I'm just curious, I'm asking because when I had gone to try and make myself aware of this last year after the drawings and everything, that was what I felt was being almost promoted, that Memorial Park was it. Like this was gonna be the good plan.
The renderings were done because those are the sites that we were. Thank you. The renderings were done because those are the sites that we were left with. John Wise has pretty much been taken off the table. The Board of Public Works and the fire department, who would need to live there, are not in favor of it. Rebuilding on the existing site, again, I've said it before, it's cost prohibitive. There's too many costs there. So pretty much, if this doesn't pass, then we will be coming back to talk about Memorial Park, because our options are so poor that we're really stuck with that one option next. That's our plan B, it's our plan C, and our plan D, and plan F. So that's why we're pushing this. We've looked at it, the town building committee has looked at it, the fire department has looked at it, the FinCom has looked at it. They've looked at it from a financial perspective, and the Board of Selectmen has looked at it just overall. And I realize it's a new kind of shocking thing for people to see. Kevin and Mark have worked through this with us. They are believers in the fact that it's the best solution for Essex. So that's why it's on the warrant. We saw an opportunity. We couldn't pass up that opportunity. It would be shame on us if we didn't put this on the warrant and give the town an opportunity to take advantage of what is an incredible offer. If the town chooses not to, then we move on. That's how town meeting democracy works. So we needed to pick something on the warrant. The way warrants are written too, we can't put an article on that says, do you want option A, B, or C, and vote that way. The way the warrant is done is we have a specific ask. We have to ask you for this, and then you get to say yes or no. And then if you say no, next time out, we're going to ask for something different. So that's your turn.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Jenny Bucci Antal. So full disclosure, my deceased husband was on the department for 43 years, passed away from cancer. Just a side note. I really would like the audience and every resident here to think back, those of us that have been in town for a long time, sorry for my back, about the town meetings we sat through when we were thinking about putting in a sewer system. That sewer system could have been done with a grant, and we voted it down. How many people are still paying for their sewer? We voted it down. Don't do this. Don't make this mistake again. This is a great opportunity. We work long and hard for the residents. We truly do. Everything we do is with your best interest at heart. We look at all options. We try to decide, number one, what's the best need for our future, not for what we're going to need today, not for the trucks the department are going to need. We try and imagine how big they're going to get, because we don't want to come back to you. I don't want to be looking at more numbers, trust me, to see what another fire station is going to cost us. I want to do it right the first time. And I believe everybody sitting behind me has your interest in heart. We want to do it right. We don't want to tear down a small building or try and renovate a small building, spend millions of dollars, and then find out, sorry, it's not big enough. So please, I know this is quick. I know it's a lot of money, but please think about this in the right area.
Hi, I'm Lisa from Winthrop Street, and I do want to thank all my firemen, friends, and town officials for making us have such a great little town, and our business owners. And I just had one question, since I'm trying to get my head around the village site, and we just had that one little glimpse of a building on the overlay of the building and what the size would be. So I'm hearing some conversation about parking for church and things. Do you foresee some permanent municipal or just public parking also on the site? Is that what you're referring to as far as church parking? And also, I noticed it goes down over into the trees, and do you see a connection from our present land up through that could be any kind of tiny little extra green space or extra public parking? I'm a little confused about the parking for church and this and that. That's basically my question.
Sorry about having to share the microphone. So that's a good question, and that's one sort of unfortunate aspect of the fact that this is hurried, a rushed sort of thing. And I don't want to say rushed because we've had plenty of meetings, we've talked about it. It's not like we're jumping into this blind. We've known about it because of the confidentiality for months more than, unfortunately, everyone else has had the opportunity to know about it. But as far as the site goes, there is a lower area of the site. Brendan, can you get that visual back up? There is a lower area of the site that abuts the existing municipal parking lot that could potentially be an expansion area for that facility. No, do you have the one with my little square? Because that's to scale. It shows. So the footprint of the existing Village restaurant is very comparable to what the needs of the fire station would be. So you can picture pretty clearly. So, sorry. So the red outline is the 10,000 square feet. The Village restaurant takes up this area here. It's a little bit more jagged edge. So the area, we're picturing the area behind the station would be where dedicated parking, not necessarily all of it, would be set aside for first responders to come into the station, park here, enter the station, and exit. Clearly, I cut this off too low, but the area in front of the fire station would not obviously be suitable for parking because that's where fire engines have to exit. But there remains other areas along the perimeter. There's the commercial buildings here, so there is opportunity for public parking and or public, there's a little park out here right now, whether that's relocated or something else happens, but we don't have specific plans yet. We know we have enough area to do this. We would work to incorporate municipal parking. We would incorporate some little green space. This does connect to the stairs that we have, so yeah, so if the fire station were sitting pretty much where the Village restaurant is, we would probably lose this area, but we could recreate something here and have parking in this area. The facility could remain. So the point being is there's a lot of options. There's no specific plans on that yet, but we know we have the room to do a number of things and serve the fire department well. So I guess that's the long, short answer. Other questions? It's 10 minutes to 9. We'll be doing this again next Wednesday, the 18th, and then Tuesday, the 24th. If you think of something in the meantime, you're welcome to come back. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and we appreciate your time.